All around us, we build our lives and our motivation and inspiration from heroes. Guys who have done astounding stuff. There is no movie that you watch that is very captivating and is blockbuster that doesn't have a hero and doesn't have a villain. And the hero's pedigree increases to the value and the enormity of the villain's fierceness. A small villain, small hero. An imposing villain creates a shining, magnificent hero. Anyway, I'm talking not about movies in these episodes. I'm talking about thinking, and I'm talking about how we can think long. And I'm going to tie into this villain, hero things in our thoughts later on in this episode today. But I want us to look at one more way in which we can deliberately think long. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Life Signatures podcast with Lawrence Namale. Lawrence is a life coach, author, and keynote speaker who loves to tackle different topics on purpose, productivity, and resilience. His mission in life is to awaken all your boundless possibilities available in you. Life Signatures podcast is dedicated to bring to reality every single person who knows that deep down in their gut, there's got to be more to life than this. And now, here is your host, Lawrence Namale.
Been going through this series, you know by now it's clear that thinking it is the most productive thing the human being can engage in. You also are aware that we think, but we actually don't think. And so we're saying that it is important for us to start thinking and to think long at that the person who has a long-term kind of a thinking or a vision, so to speak, is much more productive than the guy who is only thinking about today or at the end of the month. And the biggest problem, my friends, the biggest problem on the face of the earth today is that the whole human race, a large percentage of the human race has been schooled to think just in 30 days. For the most part, even just a day. Because it's in the 30 days that you get paid. It's in the 30 days that you get to pay bills. And that's as long as our thoughts go. It's the sorriest thing ever. We've been schooled through it for generations on end until it's like culture. It's like we are given to it. And when someone tells you to think for the year or to think for 5 years, think for 10 years, even those people who normally ask you in interviews, tell us about your life in 5 years. They don't have their own thoughts authentic for that question that they're asking you, because it's a generational thing, it's a cultural thing, it's a status quo thing. That's the sorriest thing ever. And we need to start thinking long and change that equation. How can we do this? You might be asking. One, we said in the previous episodes, you've got to be deliberate about it. If there is no deliberation, there's no intention, it's not going to happen. It's not an arbitrary thing. The thinking I'm talking about is things set aside specifically to work through thinking. Not to do any other thing, not to be distracted by any other thing. But time has been set aside, maybe 15 minutes or 30 minutes a day, to do nothing but think and consider and put things into perspective. That's where visioning comes in. That's where visualization comes in. That's where mind storming comes in. That's where brainstorming comes in. That's where mind mapping comes in. When is the last time we did these things on a daily basis? So we've got to be deliberate about it, otherwise it's not going to happen. The second thing we've got to do is to make sure that we are authentic in our thinking. Stop thinking someone else's thoughts. You see someone with a TV dish, whatever they call those, a satellite dish. You do not think. You say, oh, me too. We have a me too mentality all over the place. See someone putting on a suit, me too. Someone putting on sandals, you've got to think authentic. And the authenticity is found within our spirits, within our hearts, within our minds. It's already available for us. That's the second way you've got to think. That's where it excuses. It doesn't excuse anyone. Those ones who are saying that me, I'm like this, I can't, I'm not an intellectual, I'm not an academician. You cannot excuse yourself from thinking because of that stuff. Thinking is not a gift, is not a talent. It is a human thing, just like breathing is. So if you have breath, then you can think. And you can think from the root of your authenticity. Enough said. The third thing about thinking that I want us to discuss today, it is about thinking in a daring manner. That's why we talked about this in the episode when we were beginning, that we love stories of villains and heroes, and every time you watch a movie where the villain succeeds, you get out of the movie theater and you ask yourself, what was that all about? Why did I even go to watch that movie? For what purpose? What's that about? You always want to see a sequel to that movie because the villain must die. You know, the reason as to why we are doing that is because of one aspect that we identify with. All of us as humans, we identify with the aspect of being daring. We want to dare, and this daring is not because you have the capacity. It is not because you have the wherewithal so that you are daring. It's not because you are able. It's not because you are big. Yeah, it is because you are courageous. You've got courage to defy the odds, courage to defy the impossibilities, courage to defy the fear, courage to defy your own mess. You are daring enough. And that's the kind of aspect that we need to inculcate in our thinking. As if we were thinking long, we need to inculcate in our thinking the daring, the courage, the confidence to dare to do the impossible. I think it is Roosevelt. I've quoted Roosevelt very many times in this episode. He says, far much better it is to do mighty things, to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs even though checkered by failure, than to take rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much because they live in the twilight, in the great twilight that neither knows victory nor defeat. Far much better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though there is a possibility, there will always be a possibility, even though there is a possibility of failing, smack in the face. It is much better to dare, much better to attempt. What do you want to do in your life? We normally ask our kids, what do you want to do when you become big, when you grow up? What do you want to do? And they mention all these things that are already available on the face of the earth. And we dare them to do mighty things as if we are daring ourselves. My point is this: when we are thinking, can we inculcate the aspect of confident daring? Can we inculcate the aspect of courageous activities in our thoughts, in our thinking? Can we look at some things that are yet to be, and they are maybe even in the impossible realm? That's what this man called Martin Luther King Jr. did. He said, Dad, I've got a dream today. And it was an impossibility at that moment in time. It was unthinkable whatever that dream was. But he was thinking about it, and he was bold enough to voice it. That's what J.F. Kennedy did when he said, "You gotta put a man on the moon in this decade, before the turn of this decade. You gotta put a man on the moon," even before the technology for doing it was available. It is the daring, it is the courageous daring that brings the impossibilities down, brings the villains tumbling down, brings the Goliath down. Remember the story of David and Goliath? I mean, for 40 days, someone is taunting a whole army, including their king, and they are cowering in their caves daily for 40 days. And then a young boy thinks, he says, "I can take him out. I've taken out a lion, I've taken out a bear. He's one of them. He's just like him. I can take him out." That's a daring thought. So much daring that the king asked this guy, "Are you sure about this?" Yeah. Sometimes people ask you, "Are you sure you're going to do that stuff?" That's how it tells you you have thought a daring thought. But how many times have people given you that feedback? Are you sure? Are you sure about this? So inculcate in our thinking the courage, the confidence, the daring. Far much better it is to dare mighty things. Let us dare mighty things in our thoughts. And remember, those thoughts are authentic in the first place. Remember that? Let us dare those mighty things. That's where the thinking big that people are normally talking about comes in. You're thinking about winning, then win big. But you've thought about winning in the first place. You've not thought about being average or being at par. You've thought about winning. Then win big. Now that you've thought about winning, far much better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs. In terms of your finances, think mighty. Dare to go for the big. Dare to go for the impossible. What is 1 million? What is 1 billion? I think the reason as to why sometimes these things are not materializing in our lives is because we are not thinking about them in the first place. Million, Lawrence, what are you talking about? Talking about 1 million? You don't even have 1 million yourself. Why are you telling us about a millionaire here? You don't even have 1 million about you. I mean, as long as we are not going to embrace these mighty things, as long as we're not going to embrace these impossible things in our thoughts, as long as we're not going to deliberate about this deep-seated impossibilities and big mountains to climb. Muhammad Ali says it's not the mountain ahead to climb that wears us down, it is the pebble in our shoe. The mountain is something that can be climbed one step at a time, but it cannot be done if we don't think. We set off through the daring thoughts. And even as you're going around, you're thinking, "Man, I'm stupid. This is stupid. This is silly. This is maybe the sun has baked my head. What am I thinking? What was I thinking?" And before you know it, it's done. But we are so much paralyzed by our average thinking. We're so much paralyzed by our normal automated thinking. And nothing daring, nothing mighty tends to be done in our lives. In fact, for the most part, we are encumbered by our own limitations. We think we can't because we don't have this, we don't have that connection, we don't have those papers, we don't have this, and we don't think. So as we are setting ourselves up to think, let us be deliberate about it. Let us be authentic about it. But let us also be daring. Remember, far much better it is to dare mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to take rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in the great twilight that knows victory nor defeat. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Life Signatures Radio. If you enjoyed today's show, subscribe to Life Signatures Radio on iTunes, Stitcher, or visit our website at lifesignatures.libsyn.com. Life Signatures Radio, fresh, clean, and inspiring.